If anyone had told me a few years ago that I'd be sitting here, writing out my life like it was some kind of dramatic story, I would have laughed in their face. I wasn't the type for drama, and I certainly wasn't the one who got caught up in messy situations. I always thought I had everything figured out, that I was in control. But life? It has a way of throwing you a curveball when you least expect it. Let me rewind a bit. I'm not the kind of guy to wallow in self-pity, but what I'm about to say, it's the truth. No softening the blow. No skipping over the uncomfortable stuff. You deserve to know the full story, the whole ugly truth. Maybe it'll help someone out there, maybe not. But right now it's helping me sort through my thoughts. So here it goes. I grew up in a typical small-town family. Dad worked long hours and Mom, well, she was always there running the show. We weren't rich by any means, but we were comfortable enough. My parents? They were the kind of couple who believed in sticking it out, no matter what. Sure, they fought a lot, but divorce? That word wasn't even in their vocabulary. I grew up thinking that marriage was forever, that once you committed, that was it. You didn't give up, you worked through the rough patches, and you stayed loyal, no matter what. That's where my warped idea of commitment came from. But the thing about growing up with parents like that is you start to think everything should just work. I thought if I tried hard enough, I could fix anything, that any relationship could be saved. Even my first marriage, I honestly thought I could make that one work. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. My first wife and I were way too young, too eager to dive in without thinking. We rushed into everything: marriage, buying a house, planning for a family. But when reality hit, money problems, her realizing we weren't as compatible as we thought, it all came crashing down. That was my first real taste of betrayal. She left me for someone else. Someone she probably thought was more exciting, I guess. And there I was, left to clean up the mess. But I came out of it with this ironclad resolve. The next time, I wouldn't fail. And then I met her. Her name? Let's call her Amanda for now. We met at a party, of all places. I wasn't expecting anything serious. I was still recovering from my divorce. But she had this magnetic energy that just pulled me in. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. The kind of woman who made you forget about all the bad stuff in your past. We started slow. Our first date wasn't anything special, just a simple dinner at a little Italian restaurant I used to go to. But it wasn't the food that caught my attention. It was the conversation. She was sharp, witty, and held her own in a way that made me feel like I'd met someone rare. I remember thinking, this could be it. This is someone I could see myself with for the long haul. We both had our baggage, sure, but it felt like we could handle it together, like we could overcome anything. It wasn't always smooth sailing. We had our rough spots, like any couple does. I lost my job once, and for a while, we were scraping by on just her income. But we got through it. We were a team, or at least that's what I thought. Looking back, hindsight's a funny thing. You realize how blind you were to all the warning signs. But before I get into that, I need to mention someone else. My best friend, Ethan. Ethan and I go way back. We've been tight since high school, back when we thought we could take on the world and nothing could touch us. He wasn't just a friend. He was like a brother. We did everything together: sports, road trips, even some wild nights out that I'd rather forget. When my first marriage fell apart, Ethan was the one who was there for me, helping me through the worst of it. I trusted him with everything. He was the first person I introduced Amanda to. The three of us even took a few trips together, just some fun getaways with no drama. I never once thought there could be any tension between the two of them. But now, looking back, I wonder if I missed something. Anyway, I thought I had it all figured out. We fell into this comfortable routine, talking about the future, making plans for kids, vacations, a bigger house. You know, all the things you think about when you're planning a life together. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. After everything I'd been through, it felt like I had finally made it. A stable home, a woman I loved, a best friend who was like family. But man, family life can be blinding. You get so caught up in the day-to-day that you don't see the cracks forming under the surface. We spent our Sundays binge-watching shows, planning our next vacation, dreaming about how many kids we wanted to have. I was naive enough to think that stability meant everything was fine. But stability's a joke when everything beneath the surface is shifting. And yeah, I know you're probably wondering when things started to go downhill. But here's the thing. At first, it doesn't feel like anything's wrong. You don't see the betrayal coming, because you don't want to. I didn't. And with Ethan, we were so close that I figured if something was off, he'd let me know. He always had my back, just like I had his. I never thought for a second that my best friend and my wife. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There were small things, little details that looking back scream red flag. But at the time, I was too busy with my perfect little life to notice. For now, just know this. Things weren't as perfect as I made them seem. You know how people say that when something's wrong, you can just feel it in your gut? Like there's this nagging sense that something's off. Even if everything looks fine on the outside, that's what happened to me. And the worst part? It crept up on me slowly, like a shadow, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't anything major at first. Just little things. Small changes that might have seemed normal if they hadn't started to pile up. Amanda? Yeah, she started acting differently. I'll never forget the first time I noticed it. She became obsessed with her phone. Now, before that, we were the kind of couple who shared everything. Texts, funny memes, random things. But suddenly, she started keeping things to herself. She became secretive. I started noticing little things, like how she would tilt her phone away from me when I walked by, or how she'd lock it the moment I sat down next to her. Yeah, maybe it sounds a little paranoid, but when you've been with someone for years, you start to notice these shifts. It's like when someone starts treating their phone like it's some kind of secret weapon, like it holds the keys to a hidden world. Then came the late nights at work. Sure, late nights in marketing weren't unusual, but they started happening more and more often. She'd come home smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, and her hair and makeup looked all done up, like she was heading out somewhere, not just coming home from a long day. I'd ask how her day was, try to make some casual conversation, but she was always too tired. A vague smile, and then off to bed she'd go, leaving me sitting in the living room with this growing sense of unease. I remember the night it all hit me. She came in at some ridiculous hour, and there I was sitting in the dark, waiting like some cliché. "Where the hell have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though it was hard. She rolled her eyes like I was overreacting. "I told you, I had a late meeting," she said, kicking off her heels and heading straight for the bathroom. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. "A late meeting that ends at midnight?" I asked, my voice rising a little. "Come on, Amanda. What's really going on?" She didn't even turn to look at me. "Work's stressful right now. You know how it is. Can we not do this tonight?" That line, "work's stressful," became her go-to for everything. Maybe it was true. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. But something in her tone, the way she refused to even glance at me, just didn't sit right. Then there was Ethan. This guy had been my best friend for years. We'd been through everything together. But out of nowhere, he started pulling away. No more weekend fishing trips. No more grabbing beers after work. Suddenly, there was always an excuse. Busy with work, family stuff, you name it. And when we did hang out, he'd be off, distant, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. It wasn't just me who noticed. Our other friends started saying the same thing. One night, after a few beers, one of the guys said, "What's up with Ethan lately? He's been acting strange." I laughed it off at the time, shrugged it off as work stress. But deep down, something gnawed at me. Was something going on with him too? Was he hiding something from me? For a while, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was just being paranoid, reading too much into every little detail. But as time went on, it became harder to ignore the signs. Amanda changed her phone password. Now, maybe couples don't need to share everything. But she'd never done that before. We used to trust each other completely. And now it felt like I wasn't even a part of her life anymore. I tried talking to her about it. I really did. One night after dinner, I sat her down and said, "Look, I know things are crazy at work, but you've been acting distant lately. I just want to know if everything's okay." She didn't even hesitate. "I'm fine. It's just stress. You don't need to worry about it," she said. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning in doubt, feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. Every time I tried to get her to open up, it was the same response. "It's just work. I'm tired. Nothing's wrong. You're overthinking it." It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was this flatness to her voice, like she was reading from a script. And, yeah, I started checking her phone. I'm not proud of it, but what else was I supposed to do? I had to know if I was losing my mind or if something was actually wrong. But every time I looked, I found nothing. No texts, no strange photos, just the usual work emails and boring group chats. But the more I checked, the more I convinced myself that I was missing something. Then one night, after another late meeting, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her flat out, "Are you cheating on me?" She froze for a split second, just long enough for me to catch it. But then she turned around, gave me this exasperated look, and said, "Seriously? You're accusing me of that? After everything we've been through?" Her words stung, but the way she said them, it was too rehearsed, too perfect. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I knew. I knew she was lying. And Ethan? Well, he had been lying too. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing my best friend. But instead of confronting them both, I did what anyone in my shoes would have done. I kept quiet. I watched. I waited. I started keeping track of every excuse, every late night, every odd look. I didn't let on that I knew something was wrong. But in the back of my mind, I was piecing everything together. I was building an invisible wall between us because I knew that when the truth finally came out, I was going to be ready for it. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to be wrong so badly. I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, it was all in my head. But when the signs are slapping you in the face, there's only so much you can ignore. The thing that really pushed me over the edge? It was the family dinner. Amanda had always been big on family. Her parents, my parents, even the cousins. We'd been planning this dinner for weeks. Just a simple Sunday gathering, nothing fancy. But then, the afternoon of the dinner, she suddenly had a work emergency. Not just any emergency, but one that meant she had to cancel the whole evening. Something came up at work, she said, and that was it. That was the moment. The last straw. I called Ethan, thinking maybe we could at least grab a beer, blow off some steam. But he didn't answer. Not once. I texted, left a voicemail, even checked his social media. Nothing. And that was it. Something was definitely going on. The next morning, I made the call. I'll never forget how badly my hands were shaking as I dialed the number for a private investigator. It felt like I was crossing a line I could never come back from. But at that point, I was desperate. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep living in this endless, gnawing uncertainty. The investigator's name was Doug. He wasn't anything special, just an ordinary guy, which is exactly what I needed. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town, far from anyone who might recognize me. I laid it all out for him. The weird behavior, the constant excuses, all the little things that just didn't sit right. Doug didn't bat an eye. He just listened, taking notes like it was just another day on the job. I remember asking, "How long will it take to get to the bottom of this?" Doug didn't hesitate, still scribbling away. "Depends. Some cases wrap up in a couple of days. Others might take weeks. But don't worry. If something's going on, we'll find it." That if was all I had left to hold on to. A tiny sliver of hope, trying to convince myself that maybe it was all in my head. I wasn't the kind of guy to jump to conclusions. Maybe Amanda was just stressed. Maybe Ethan had been busy. But deep down, I knew I was right. It didn't take long. Just 3 days later, Doug called me. His voice was calm, almost detached, like he was used to delivering bad news. "You might want to meet up," he said. "I've got something you need to see." We met again at the same coffee shop. Doug slid a manila envelope across the table. I stared at it for a moment, my stomach twisting. I wasn't ready for what I knew was inside, but I couldn't put it off any longer. Inside were photos. Crisp, high-quality images of Amanda and Ethan. And not just casual pictures, but images of them together, hand in hand at a restaurant, walking into a hotel, laughing together like they used to laugh with me. My heart sank. I felt nauseous. It wasn't just the photos, though. Doug had done his homework. He had texts between them, screenshots of their conversations, even a video from a hotel security camera. Amanda and Ethan walking arm in arm, disappearing behind a door. I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I couldn't ignore it. The proof was right there in front of me, undeniable. Amanda, the woman I had built my life with. And Ethan, my best friend, the guy I'd trusted more than anyone. They both betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. I sat there, staring at the photos in disbelief. Doug didn't say much. He just gave me the space to process it. Finally, after what felt like forever, I managed to ask, How long has this been going on? Doug shrugged. A few months, maybe longer. They've been sneaking around for a while. Months? I could feel the rage starting to bubble up inside of me. I wanted to smash something. I wanted to drive straight to their faces and confront them both, demand answers right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I thanked Doug, shoved the envelope into my bag, and left the coffee shop in a daze. The drive home felt like a blur, my mind racing with everything I'd just seen. The anger didn't take long to catch up with me. It wasn't just Amanda. What she'd done cut deep, but it was Ethan, too. He was my best friend, the guy I thought of as family. And he betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. He stabbed me in the back, thinking I'd never figure it out. No, he wasn't going to get away with it. Neither of them would. That's when the plan started to form. I wasn't going to confront them with some emotional outburst. No, I'd be smarter than that. I'd hit them where it would hurt the most. For Amanda, that was our marriage. For Ethan, it was his career. Ethan worked for a prominent company, one where reputation was everything. He was always boasting about how perfect his career was, how he was next in line for a big promotion, how he was the company's golden child. That's where I would strike, right at the heart of what mattered most to him. The first step was gathering more evidence. I already had enough from Doug, but I needed more, something that would leave no room for doubt. So I had Doug follow them for another week, digging up whatever he could. It wasn't difficult. They were reckless, careless, assuming they'd never get caught. More dinners, more hotels, even a weekend getaway. They didn't care who saw. Once I had what I needed, I started to make my move. Ethan's company had strict codes of conduct, especially when it came to personal scandals. I knew if I played my cards right, I could destroy his career with just a few well-timed leaks. I wrote up an anonymous email to the HR department, attaching some of the most damning evidence. Photos of Ethan and Amanda together, their texts, a note explaining how Ethan's affair could damage the company's image. I even made sure to mention that he was up for a promotion, just to dig the knife in a little deeper. And then I sent it. I couldn't help but smile as I clicked send. I knew they had no idea what was coming. Every time Amanda came home late or canceled plans, I'd sit back and think about how much closer I was to seeing them both pay for what they'd done. She had no idea what was building beneath the surface. And Ethan? He hadn't called me in weeks, probably too wrapped up in my wife to even think about his so-called best friend. Finally, after what felt like forever, I sent the email. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. They deserved everything that was coming to them. Revenge isn't something you rush. It takes patience. Cold, calculated patience. And I wasn't about to let my emotions take control. I wasn't going to make a mistake. This had to be perfect, and it had to hurt them where it would hit hardest. After I sent that email to Ethan's HR department, I didn't just sit back and wait. I kept collecting more evidence, making sure everything was airtight. Doug kept following them, and every new piece of dirt he handed me felt like another nail in their coffin. I knew exactly where they were going, what they were doing. They were becoming more and more reckless. The more I watched, the more obvious it became. They were going out in public, no longer trying to hide what they were doing. They thought they were invincible. I tracked their movements. I knew when they went out for lunch, where they grabbed drinks after work, even when they went on their weekend business trips. But the real jackpot came with social media. They thought they were being sneaky, posting vague photos of sunsets or dinners at hotels. But if you paid attention, you could put it all together. Ethan would post a picture of a work event with a glass of wine in his hand, and an hour later, Amanda would post the exact same thing. Same place, same glass of wine. It was as if they were waving a huge neon sign saying, "We're messing around." I collected everything. Screenshots, timestamps, comments. It was all part of the plan. Ethan's image as the perfect family man, the one he'd worked so hard to build, was about to come crashing down, and I was going to be the one holding the wrecking ball. See, Ethan wasn't just some guy at the office. He had big ambitions, huge ones. He loved to talk about how he was in line for a big promotion, how he was the office golden boy, the one everyone admired. The image he created for himself was built on lies. He had convinced everyone he was the perfect husband, the devoted father, the guy who always put his family first. And at work, that facade paid off. He was well-liked, respected, but no one knew the truth. No one, except me. And that's where I was going to strike. His career was his Achilles heel, the thing he cared about more than anything. And I was going to tear it down. But before I unleashed the chaos at work, I needed to prime the rest of our social circle. The truth was too big to drop all at once. I needed to let it leak slowly, plant the seeds of doubt before the final blow. So, I began casually talking to our mutual friends. Nothing too direct, just small comments here and there. Have you noticed Ethan's been acting weird lately? Or, I haven't seen much of Amanda recently. She's been working late all the time. I didn't accuse him outright, but I suggested that something felt off. People love gossip, especially when they think they're in on a secret. I knew once the seed of suspicion was planted, it wouldn't take long for people to start talking. And they did. It didn't take long before whispers started making their way back to me. People began asking questions, and I played the part of the concerned husband to perfection. Yeah, things have been rough lately, I'd say, lowering my voice like I was sharing something personal. I don't know what's going on with Amanda, but we're trying to work through it. It was all part of the setup. I wasn't just aiming at Ethan's career. I wanted to make sure his relationships, friends, colleagues, family were shattered too. The more isolated he became, the harder the fall would be. Ethan had always been the guy who had it all together, the one everyone looked up to. By the time I was done, no one would trust him. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on his work situation. I knew that HR had received my anonymous email, but I wasn't in a rush. I wanted them to dig deep enough to uncover the cracks for themselves. In the meantime, I kept collecting more dirt. I even had a chat with Ethan's wife, which felt like a whole new level of satisfaction. She had no clue. She still thought her husband was the perfect family man. I didn't say much, just asked how things were going with Ethan, how the kids were. She gushed about him like he was some sort of saint, telling me how lucky she was to have him. It was hard not to laugh. I could barely keep a straight face. I won't lie, it was difficult at times, especially when I saw how much she adored him. For a second, I'd feel a little guilty. But then I'd remember the photos, the messages, the way he betrayed me without a second thought. That guilt evaporated faster than it came. As the weeks passed, the tension kept building. Ethan and Amanda kept up their charade, acting like nothing was wrong, but the walls were closing in. People started noticing the awkwardness between Ethan and me. Our mutual friends asked why we hadn't hung out like we used to. I'd shrug and give some vague answer. People change, I guess. But I could see the curiosity in their eyes. They were dying to know what was really going on. Soon enough, they'd get the full story. Finally, after weeks of preparation, it was time to set everything in motion. The thing about revenge is it's not just about hitting back. It's about timing. You need to strike when it'll hurt the most, when the impact will ripple out to everyone involved. And that's exactly what I had in mind when I planned this event. It wasn't enough for Amanda and Ethan to suffer in private. No, they needed to be exposed for who they really were in front of everyone they cared about. It took weeks of careful planning, but I rented a swanky venue. One of those upscale places people use for corporate events or milestone celebrations. It had to look professional, like an innocent grand occasion. I sent out the invites, making sure to include all the key players. Our mutual friends, colleagues, even a few of Ethan's higher-ups from work. If I was going to destroy him, I had to do it in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to him. I wasn't shy about inviting Amanda's family either. Her parents had always supported us, and I knew this would hit them hard. They had a right to know what their daughter had been up to. I made sure everyone who had any connection to our lives was there. No one would escape what was about to unfold. In the days leading up to the event, I rehearsed my speech over and over again. I wanted it to be flawless. It couldn't just be some angry rant. No, it had to be calm, composed, just stating the facts. Facts no one could argue with. I had the photos, the videos, the texts, all printed, organized, and ready to go on the big screen. I even hired a tech guy to make sure everything would run smoothly. The night of the event, the air was buzzing with excitement. People were laughing, drinking, chatting about work, about family, like it was just another night. Amanda played the part of the perfect wife, smiling and talking to everyone like nothing was wrong. Ethan was working the room like the seasoned pro he was, shaking hands, laughing, completely unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. I watched them from the other side of the room, keeping my distance, letting them enjoy their last moments of normalcy. It was almost sickeningly amusing to watch their confidence, to see how sure they were that they had gotten away with everything. They had no idea what was coming. They had no clue what was coming. As the moment drew near, I made my way to the front of the room. The lights dimmed, and the buzz of conversation began to fade as everyone turned to face me. I tapped the microphone and cleared my throat, taking a moment before I began speaking. "I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It really means a lot to me to have all of you, friends, family, colleagues, gathered here." I paused for a second, letting my words sink in. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. Thinking about what real friendship means, what trust really is, and how crucial it is to know that the people closest to you will stand by you, no matter what. I saw Amanda glance at me, her face momentarily flickering with confusion. Ethan, standing near the back, had started shifting uncomfortably. "Good. And that's why," I continued, keeping my voice steady, "I feel like it's time to share something with all of you. Something personal. Something that's been weighing on me for a while." I signaled to the tech guy in the back, and the screen behind me lit up. The first image appeared, Amanda and Ethan walking hand in hand outside a restaurant. There was a sharp intake of breath from the crowd. Amanda's face went pale, and Ethan's grin melted faster than I could have imagined. I didn't give them a chance to react. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is my wife and my best friend, caught in the act of sneaking around behind my back." I kept going. One by one, the photos flashed up on the screen, more images of them together, laughing, hugging, walking into a hotel. Then the texts appeared, screenshots of their conversations, full of flirtation, secret meetings, and even jokes at my expense. The room went silent, except for the sounds of whispered disbelief. I watched as the shock rippled through the crowd. Amanda tried to speak but stumbled over her words, her voice shaky. It's not what you think," she stammered, but no one believed her. Ethan didn't even try to defend himself. He just stood there, frozen, the weight of everything crashing down on him. I could see his brain working, his thoughts racing as he scrambled to figure out how to salvage this in front of his colleagues, his friends, his family. But it was too late. The silence was quickly broken. People started muttering, then shouting. Friends I'd known for years were furious, demanding answers from Amanda and Ethan. Some even turned to me, offering their support, but I didn't need it. This wasn't about feeling sorry for me. This was about making sure they paid for what they'd done. Amanda's parents, sitting in the front row, looked like they'd been hit with a sledgehammer. Her mother was fighting back tears, and her father couldn't stop shaking his head, still in shock. I almost felt bad for them, but then I remembered everything, what they'd allowed their daughter to do. Almost. The crowd split. Some people gathered around me, offering kind words, asking if I was okay. Others turned their attention back to Amanda and Ethan, demanding answers. It was chaos. Amanda, wide-eyed and panicked, tried to get close to me. "Please, can we talk about this?" "It's not what you think," she begged. But I stepped back, shaking my head. "There's nothing left to talk about, Amanda," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Ethan, meanwhile, stood like a deer caught in headlights. He knew it was over. Everything he had worked for, all the relationships he'd built, his reputation, was crumbling in real time. The people he had been trying to impress all evening were already whispering to one another, distancing themselves from him. His whole life had been built on a lie, and in a matter of minutes, it all came crashing down. I let them stew in it. I watched as they both realized the weight of what they had done. Amanda started crying, trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen, but no one cared anymore. Ethan slunk off into a corner, his mind likely spinning, trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together. As the night wore on, people began to leave, shaking their heads in disbelief. A few came over to me, telling me I did the right thing, that they were proud of me for standing up for myself. But I didn't feel proud. I felt empty, like I just watched everything I had built go up in flames. But at least it was over. The scandal spread like wildfire. Within days, everyone at work knew about the affair. Ethan's name was on everyone's lips, and thanks to my well-timed email, his promotion was immediately revoked. I even heard rumors that they were considering letting him go completely. too much bad press for the company to handle. As for Amanda, well, let's just say she lost a lot more than just her reputation. The fallout had only just begun. Life after the scandal was like watching a wildfire consume everything in its path. Everything they thought they had built reduced to ash. Amanda and Ethan, they lost everything. And honestly, I couldn't say they didn't deserve it. Let's start with Ethan. He'd always been so smug, so sure of himself and his career. But it didn't take long for the truth to catch up with him. Word spread fast. His bosses heard about the affair, and they couldn't afford the public scandal. The career he'd spent years building crumbled just as quickly as the lies he'd been telling. The promotion Ethan had been bragging about for months? Gone just like that. His career? Destroyed. Last I heard, they gave him the boot quietly, didn't want the drama making waves. But the damage was done. His image as the office golden boy shattered in an instant. The people who once admired him, trusted him, none of them looked at him the same way. No one wanted to be associated with a man who had betrayed his wife with his best friend's spouse. And that perfect family he used to flaunt? It fell apart in record time. His wife found out about everything. The affair with Amanda, the lies, the deceit. She took the kids and walked out. And from what I heard, she'd already filed for divorce. Ethan's life had been reduced to rubble. All because he couldn't keep his hands to himself. All because of his selfishness and arrogance. Amanda? She didn't fare any better. Her family had always seen her as the picture of perfection. Well, they weren't so supportive when the truth came out. Her parents were devastated, completely embarrassed by her actions. Friends we'd had for years? They cut her off without a second thought. She went from being a beloved figure to a pariah. The woman who destroyed her own marriage and shattered a friendship in the process. As for me, I didn't even waste time responding to her. She tried to reach out, of course, calls, texts, and even showing up at my door, crying, begging me for forgiveness. But I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. She made her choice, and now she would have to face the consequences. Part of me couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction watching the two of them unravel. The guilt they had to carry, the consequences of their betrayal, it was something they both earned. But that sense of satisfaction didn't last long. After everything settled down, I realized I was left to rebuild my own life. The emotional toll of betrayal was heavier than I ever imagined. For a long time, I kept to myself, avoiding the people who reminded me of what had happened, not ready to face the world that had turned upside down. Eventually, though, I realized I couldn't stay in that place forever. I needed to move forward. So, I slowly started putting myself back out there. I met new people, people who didn't know the backstory, people who didn't look at me as the guy who got played. Slowly but surely, I started trusting again, piece by piece. And while the scars of the past never fully faded, they became easier to live with. It was a process. There are still days when the old wounds ache, when I think about the life I thought I was building, the trust one once had in Amanda, in Ethan. But when that pain comes creeping back, I can remind myself of how far I've come. I'm no longer the man who was betrayed. I'm the man who made it through, who survived. Looking back, I can see how much I've changed. It's made me realize how fragile trust is, how easily people can destroy what you have without a second thought. But it's also taught me something important, something I wish I'd learned sooner. You can't control other people's actions. You can't make them love you or stay loyal. No matter how much you give, the only thing you can truly control is how you respond when everything falls apart. For a while, I thought I was the one to blame. I wondered if I wasn't enough, or if I'd missed the warning signs. But that kind of thinking? It's a trap. Their betrayal wasn't about me. It was about them, their choices, their selfishness, their lack of honesty. And once I accepted that, I was able to let go of the guilt, the anger, and the bitterness. If there's anything I've learned from this whole mess, it's that you have to value yourself. You have to recognize your worth, and never let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are. Because at the end of the day, the only person who is always going to have your back is you. And that's enough. So here I am, moving forward on my terms. I'm not looking for love right now, and maybe I never will. And you know what? I'm perfectly fine with that. I've learned how to be content with who I am, without needing someone else to make me feel whole. And honestly, That's the best form of revenge I could ever ask for.